Priya Anand had wheeled patients to 100 appointments, but she had never carried a folder this thick into a building this cold, and she had never watched anyone hand it over with such steady hands. Emergency motions, the sign over the window read. The man behind the glass didn't look up from his screen. Name and matter. Adeline Voss, the older woman said. Her voice was soft but even, the kind of voice that had spent a lifetime not needing to be loud. Petition for emergency guardianship. My grandson, Caleb. He's 9. She slid the folder through the slot. Priya had helped her assemble it the night before, at the kitchen table, under a lamp that buzzed. The notarized guardianship petition, signed and witnessed 3 weeks ago. The custody history. And on top, clipped neatly, a single page from Dr. Reyes at the hospice. The letter Mrs. Voss had asked for twice, gently, because she didn't like to make people repeat themselves. The clerk flipped it open, thumbed past the letter without reading past the first line, and reached for a stack of pre-printed slips. Regular docket's about 6 weeks out, he said. I can get you in faster if there's an actual emergency, abuse, immediate danger, that kind of thing. This looks like a family matter. You'll want to file through the regular calendar. He tore off a numbered ticket and set it on the counter between them. 41, they'll call you, when they call you. Mrs. Voss didn't move for a moment. Priya felt her own face go hot on the woman's behalf. The letter says 6 to 8 weeks, Mrs. Voss said, just as evenly as before. I don't have 6 weeks, mister. She glanced at the little nameplate. Driscoll, that's rather the point of the letter. Driscoll's eyes flicked to the page again, then back up, already moving on. Ma'am, I hear a lot of urgent stories at this window. Everybody's in a hurry. If you want to expedite, you can ask the judge when your number's called. He slid the ticket another inch closer to her. 41. She picked it up. She thanked him, actually thanked him, with a small nod, and turned toward the benches, the folder held against her chest like something warm. Priya followed her, stunned into silence, and only found her voice once they'd sat down. Mrs. Voss, he didn't even read it. I noticed, Mrs. Voss said, and folded her hands over the folder, and that was all. The waiting room at Bellwether County Family Court smelled like burnt coffee, fallen old carpet. A television bolted near the ceiling ran the day's docket in scrolling white text. 41 was a long way down. Priya had taken this volunteer shift because Mrs. Voss had no one else free on a Tuesday. Her daughter-in-law worked mornings, and Caleb was in school, where he belonged, where Mrs. Voss had been firm he should stay, today of all days. He doesn't need to watch grown-ups fill out forms, she'd said. He needs his spelling test. 3 days. That was what kept circling in Priya's mind. Miss Voss's birthday was Friday. Dr. Reyes hadn't said the word deadline. Hospice doctors rarely did, but he'd said weeks, not months. And Mrs. Voss had heard him the way she heard everything, without flinching and without forgetting. I just want it settled before Friday, she'd told Priya in the car. Not for me. So Caleb isn't sitting in some office somewhere while people who've never met him argue about where he sleeps. I want him to wake up Saturday and have it already be true. That's the whole wish, really. Nothing complicated. Priya stood up to stretch her legs, mostly to keep from saying something to Driscoll she'd regret, and that was when she saw the laminated sheet taped beside the window. Half curled at one corner, clearly years old, clearly never taken down because no one had ever needed to read it. Emergency motions calendar. Qualifying criteria, it said. In the flat type of a form nobody had updated since 2014. A short list followed. Imminent risk of harm to a minor. Pending deportation with minor dependent. Terminal diagnosis of sole legal guardian, with minor dependent and no alternate guardian of record. Petitions meeting any of the above shall be referred to the duty judge same day, regardless of regular docket position. Priya read it twice to be sure she wasn't inventing it out of wanting it to be true. She looked back at the window. Driscoll was helping someone else now, sliding forms back and forth. Not unkind exactly. Just a man running a counter the way you run a counter. By volume, by habit, by not looking too closely at any one folder for too long. She didn't go back to him. Instead, she found the bailiff near the metal detector, a broad, gray-haired man with a name tag that said T. Alonzo and the patient face of someone who had been doing this for 30 years. Excuse me, Priya said, and her voice came out steadier than she expected. I think there's been a mistake. That woman, she nodded toward the bench, has a terminal diagnosis and a guardianship petition for her grandson. There's no other guardian. The sign right there says that's supposed to go to the judge today. The clerk gave her a ticket for 6 weeks out. Alonso's eyes went from Priya to the sign, to Mrs. Voss sitting with her folder, and something in his face, not surprise, exactly, more like recognition, settled into place. "Let me see that folder," he said. What happened next, Priya only pieced together afterward, the way you piece together weather from the inside of a house. A door opening somewhere, a change in the air, voices in another room. Alonso took the folder to a side door marked chambers, staff only. He was gone less than 5 minutes. When he came back, he didn't say much. He set the folder gently on Mrs. Voss's lap, the way you'd hand someone back something precious, and said, "Judge wants to see this one. Won't be long." The scroll of the docket kept moving overhead, 3637, the ordinary business of the morning continuing. Motions and continuances, and a dozen small disputes nobody outside those rooms would ever think about again. Mrs. Voss watched it with the same composure she'd watched everything else. Though Priya noticed her thumb tracing slowly along the edge of the folder, once, twice, the only sign, if it was a sign at all, that she was waiting for something that mattered. It was barely 20 minutes before a different clerk, younger, in a cardigan, carrying a clipboard, came out and called, not 41, but Voss, Adeline Voss. "Courtroom 3, please, ahead of the regular calendar." Driscoll looked up from his window. Priya saw him look, saw the small furrow of, "That's not how it works," cross his face, and then saw him glance at the laminated sign on the wall beside him, the one that had been there the whole time, and say nothing at all. Courtroom 3 was smaller than Priya expected, and brighter. Morning light through high windows, no jury box, just the bench and 2 tables, and a scattering of folding chairs along the back wall where she sat. Judge Calder was a compact woman, in her 60s with reading glasses pushed up into gray hair, and she had Mrs. Voss's folder open in front of her when the case was called. Already open, already read, the physician's letter set slightly apart from the rest as if she'd held it longest. "Mrs. Voss," she said, "please sit if you'd like. This won't take as long as it should have. I'm comfortable standing, Your Honor." "Thank you." The judge nodded, unhurried, and addressed the room as much as the woman in front of her. "For the record, I've reviewed the petition for emergency guardianship of the minor, Caleb Voss, the notarized guardianship designation executed 3 weeks ago. The custody history showing no other living parent or guardian of record, and the letter from Dr. Manuel Reyes of Hartwell Hospice dated 4 days ago." She tapped the page lightly. "This petition meets every criterion on this court's own emergency calendar. Every one. It should have come to me the moment it was filed this morning." She looked up not at Mrs. Voss, but past her, toward the door, toward the front of the building, toward a window Priya understood without being told. "It didn't," Judge Calder said, "and I'd like to understand why, separately, after this hearing. That's a conversation for the front office and not for Mrs. Voss's morning, but I wanted it said in this room, on the record, so there's no question that it's being looked at." She turned back, and her voice gentled, the way a person's voice does when they're about to do something they've been waiting all morning to do. "Mrs. Voss, is there anything about this petition you'd like to add? Or anything Caleb's mother? I see her name listed as deceased 4 years ago. Anything about the family situation the court should know before I rule?" "Only that he's a good boy," Mrs. Voss said. "He likes maps. He knows the capital of every country, even the small ones. He's been living with me since he was 5, and I've raised him as my own, and I would simply like it to be settled, so that whatever happens to me, nobody has to wonder where he belongs. He already knows where he belongs. I'd like the paperwork to agree with him." Nobody in the small courtroom said anything for a moment. Priya found she was holding the strap of her bag very tightly. "Then let the record show," Judge Calder said, "that based on the notarized guardianship designation, the uncontested custody history, and the supporting medical documentation, this court grants the petition for emergency permanent guardianship of the minor Caleb Voss, naming Adeline Voss as legal guardian, effective immediately. The order will be signed, sealed, and a certified copy provided to Mrs. Voss before she leaves the building today." She set down her pen. "Congratulations, Mrs. Voss." "It's done." It was 11:42. Mrs. Voss had taken her ticket at 11:02. The certified copy took another 18 minutes to print and stamp. The cardiganed clerk apologized twice for the wait, which Mrs. Voss waved off with the same small grace she'd shown all morning. And by the time they walked back through the lobby, it was just past noon. Driscoll was still at his window. He didn't look up as they passed. Not rudely, exactly, but carefully. The particular carefulness of a man who has just spent 20 minutes being spoken to by his supervisor, with the door half shut and the laminated sign now sitting, face up, on the desk between them. Priya saw it there as they walked by. Qualifying criteria no longer curled at the corner, no longer something nobody looked at. Outside, the cold had a different quality than it had that morning, sharper, but somehow less heavy. Mrs. Voss stood on the courthouse steps for a moment with the certified order in its plain blue folder, and Priya thought she might say something about the clerk, about the 6 weeks that had nearly happened, about any of it. Instead, Mrs. Voss looked at her watch. "He'll be at recess in 20 minutes, she said. "I told him I'd be there if I could. I think I'd like to be there." They walked to the car. Priya drove. Mrs. Voss sat with the folder on her lap the whole way, not reading it again. She didn't need to, just holding it, the way she'd held the other folder that morning, like something that had finally stopped being heavy. At the school, Caleb came out at recess in a coat too big for him, scanning the fence line the way kids do, half hoping. And when he saw his grandmother standing there, he ran the last 20 feet without seeming to. Notice he was running. "Did you have your spelling test?" Mrs. Voss asked, crouching slightly to meet him. "I got deciduous." "Right," he said. "Nobody else got deciduous." "Right. I should think not," she said, and smoothed his collar, and didn't tell him anything else. Not the courthouse, not the folder, not the morning. There would be time later for the parts he needed to know, told gently and on her own schedule, the way she told him everything. Priya stood a little apart, by the fence, and found she was the one who needed a moment. She thought about the ticket. 41. Still folded in the side pocket of Mrs. Voss's purse. Kept, she suspected, the way a person keeps the stub of a ticket to something that turned out, in the end, to matter more than the weight. Friday was Mrs. Voss's birthday. Priya didn't know yet what they'd do for it. Something small, she imagined, a cake, maybe, and Caleb's terrible jokes, and the particular kind of quiet that settles over a house when something that needed to be true finally is. But she knew this much, watching the two of them walk back toward the gate, the boy talking with his hands about deciduous trees, and his grandmother listening, as if it were the only important thing in the world. Which, this morning, in the only way that mattered, it now was. The clerk had told her to wait her turn. The court, when it finally looked, found she'd never needed to. She had been right all along, and the rule had been there all along too, and all it had taken was someone reading it. 40 minutes, once someone finally did.